Lenaola and Philomena Mwilu, accusing them of gross misconduct. And still on matters election, a second memo has leaked from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, in which the chairman has allegedly ordered the exit of 3 ICT personnel following the bungled elections. In studio, we have Julie Masiga, who's a journalist. We also have Victor Bwire, who is the CEO for Media Council of Kenya. Programs manager, get that right, programs manager for Media Council of Kenya. And last but not least, we have Patrick Gadhara, who is also a cartoonist and, well, a journalist, I think, in his own right.
And a curator for The Elephant.
And a curator for The Elephant. Yes, I saw that, and well, we'll get to that a little later on. But thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thanks.
Let's start off with, first of all, the question that we are asking the public out there, and we'll also ask you to participate. Remember, you're welcome to participate in this conversation, and you can do that on social media. Our Twitter handles are going to be displayed as we carry on. Later on, we may also open up the phone lines to hear what you have to say. But I'll start, first of all, with posing to the panel the question that we've asked everybody else. Do you think the attack on the judiciary is justifiable? I'll start with you, Julie.
No, absolutely not. I think it's reckless to attack an independent arm of government, which at this point in time seems to be the sanest, because clearly the executive and parliament, things are a bit in flux at the moment. So kind of like the judiciary is kind of like the guiding light at this point in time, the stabilizing force in this country. Beyond that, rule of law, we should respect the rule of law, and we should respect judges irrespective of how they rule. And I think we should, like the Chief Justice said, every right-minded Kenyan should stand up and defend the independence of the judiciary.
Okay. Yeah. Victor, there's details coming out against some of the Supreme Court judges, and this is where now the rubber meets the road when it comes to media, because we'll obviously have propaganda being thrown left, right, and center. How should we be treating that information?
Thank you, Mike. One, with a lot of caution and professionalism. Because if you looked at yesterday, everybody, almost everywhere said the Standard story was a planted story. And that's a major, major, major thing. Because how then, I mean, because those things started circulating on social media the previous day, how Standard made it a page 1 story, everybody's wondering. In terms of the checks, who checked to verify some of those allegations? I mean, when now you hear people like Orengo saying he doesn't even have a sister with such a name, why are we running with such? Those are serious, grave matters, which, if are true, they deserve page 1 and even more pages. But when it started emerging that we treated such a matter so casually and never even made an effort to confirm some of those issues, then we even move, media credibility moves from number 3 where we are to number 7, because it's a serious problem. Issues of fake news, issues of just irresponsible handling of information. I mean, for example, you mentioned the chairman, Chebukati, has released a memo, leaked journalism, as we call it. I mean, how far should this take journalists to confirm with Chebukati, did you release any memo?
Right.
So that 24 hours we are still calling allegations. So to me, that's a serious professional negligence on the part of journalists, that we need to be a bit serious with the manner, looking at the country the way we are right now, we need to be cautious and professional in the manner we handle information.
Gadhara?
Well, I think I would go a bit farther than negligence. I think this is collusion. And I said it before with regard to the elections, that the reporting about the elections, for me, looked very much like the media was colluding, with those who are messing up the elections by refusing to report on it. And I think when you have stories such as this, which are shot full of holes, and as Victor has explained, it doesn't seem to me this is a mistake. This is deliberate, and you've got stories being allegedly planted in the newspaper agreeing and running it. It is colluding, and it is colluding with those who are attacking judges. And I think the media has to become quite cognizant of its role, and I think the more we go along, the more we start to see, and I think the public will start to see, that the media is a problem. Is the way it's behaved from entirety of the elections, from running the PDU ads till now, seems to me to be always colluding with those who are out to frustrate what the will of the people being expressed. The second thing to remember about the judiciary, it's our only arm of government that we do not directly elect, and there's a reason why we don't do this. So when we have people demonstrating as if, they're the guys who should, we are the ones who should decide who goes in, goes out, there's something that we are losing there. And it's not to say that the judiciary is not accountable to the people. It is, and people have every right to express, as Maraga recognized. But I think we've got to also be a bit more circumspect in how we put pressure, or we are seen to put pressure on judges to rule in particular ways or to behave in particular ways, because that can then come and bite us later on, because other people can protest and push for other judgments, and we don't want that. So I think we've got to be a bit more circumspect about how we deal with the judiciary, which shouldn't really be the same as how we act with, for example, the executive and the legislature, which are arms of government we actually directly elect.
Okay. Let me come back to you, Victor, and this is in regards to the scope and view and possibly what can the Media Council do, given that even the times that we're in right now is very critical in the sense that there's a lot of propaganda out there. We are competing, as it were, with social media, because social media releases something, and of course journalists and media houses want to be the first ones to break the story. However, there is credibility that needs to be protected. What can Media Council do to ensure that this is protected? Because again, we stand to lose with the public when stories basically are published and later on obvious mistakes are highlighted.
We are very concerned actually with the level and professionalism that's being, even at the council, there had a lot of discussion and in terms of just how do we engage. Do we need a separate media development institution to deal? Because there's a serious challenge where sometimes Media Council as a regulator sometimes might not do much. I mean, in terms of because these are now bordering on purely professionalism. We are now pushing the issue of the public editor, in-house training for journalists themselves, because we are tapping a lot of talent from wherever. But at what level are we mentoring these colleagues that we are bringing in the newsroom? Because Media Council cannot, for example, become trained for all media houses. But we need media houses to invest, that we are getting talent, yes, very highly professional, educated people with graduates, but at what level do we help them grow and mature to become responsible professional journalists? Because it's not just a matter of a microphone or writing. Any of us can write, but there's a difference between a professional journalist and any other writer. So that's where the gap is. We're just joking here with Patrick. Why would, for example, when we are saying NASA leader, Raila Odinga, for example, why would be the alleged engineer of Kenya politics? Why that qualification? What does that add? So we are really
poetic license.
What we are thinking about is, in fact, before 27th, I think we have a major forum, a self-reflection forum for journalists, media owners, editors, just to sit and ask. And we have invited most of our veterans, for example, who are in the newsroom, to just help. See, there's a huge problem which we can't run away from, that we need to sit and ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do so that we improve, we help the coverage? Because as we are talking about, social media is not even a competitor. Alternative media has been there all through. So social media is just it plays its own role. So mainstream media can't compete with it. But you have our own space. So let social media do. But the difference would be that social media can be, a tip for a story. But as a traditional journalist now, go further and give meat. The breaking story, I have seen one of the media houses, their logo is, we'll rather come late to the market, but with detailed factual story, than be the first to break a story. That is wrong. And sometimes I've seen, our media houses have invested heavily in online. Standard has now a huge department of online, Nation, which is very, it's a reaction that social media is the place to go. But we can't kill traditional journalism. We can't be a copy and paste.
But online journalism...
allow Julie wanted to say something. I'll let you come on.
I wanted to come out in defense of the media. Clearly, we're under attack. First of all, Gadara, collusion is a very strong word. I don't think there's, in fact, collusion in the sense that people would understand it. Because, for example, over the weekend, there was the Mutunga affidavit, which was submitted to do with Njokindungu's own matter before the JSC and also Jackton Ojwang, and that was covered comprehensively by the media on that side. So this coverage of the Philomena Mwilu and Leonola, some might say that people are viewing this thing through a party lens or through a political lens and saying that why you are attacking our people, or the people who kind of like supported us in the petition. So I think the media is trying to give a balanced view. And at the end of the day, this was a petition which was actually submitted to the JSC, which was being covered by the media, which I think, strictly speaking, they should have done that, right?
I mean, coverage I have no problem with,
yes,
you know, but
so
the idea of planted stories...
that cannot be proven.
No, again, it fits into a pattern. And this is why I'm talking about collusion. You know, when you look at what happened before the election, with the PDU ads and everything, the coverage of the elections, the fact that now, 6 weeks later, not a single media house has actually told us this is what was reported, this is what was announced. Not even one.
Before you carry on, Gadara, you are part of the media.
Of course, yes, and I agree. And I'm saying, exactly. So, but I shouldn't run away because I'm part of the media that I ignore this
And the question then would be, now that you're putting these claims on media houses, what are you doing to ensure that you're not part of that collusion?
For me and for what I do, I think it is collusion.
It is not collusion, I think it is. Because I've just said now that the coverage has been balanced. In terms of...
Let me explain myself.
Explain yourself and define why you say collusion.
Let me tell you why I say collusion. I think if you look again, I go back to the pattern, you know, from the ads they ran to the coverage that we have now. Lots of this seems to me not to be one media house making a decision, you know, by itself. Or we will not announce what guys at the constituency tallying center will say. All of them don't do it. You know, please, you said you give me time to explain. You know, you can't ask me to explain and then you keep jumping it. You know, if indeed there were no results announced at constituency tallying centers, or journalists were kicked out, where were the stories about journalists being denied? We
do media monitoring, and those stories are there.
Actually, no.
They are there.
Okay. In that regard, the media admitted perhaps a stumbling.
When it came to PDU ads, again, they all took the money. None of them stood up and said, you know,
journalists don't handle advertisements.
Again, the collusion is not happening at the journalist level. It happens at a higher level.
But the journalists...
In fact, I was on Press Pass the other time on Nation, where they were admitting there were stories they cannot carry because their bosses don't want them. This is collusion. People are agreeing.
So who is colluding? Is it the media? Is it the media owners? Is it the journalists?
The media owners.
Make that distinction between the media owners and the journalists.
All these guys are colluding. They're colluding with people both within the media establishment. As in
all right, Gadara, you've had your chance. Let me hear from Victor Bwira. You disagree with Gadara?
I mean, because Gadara talks from Nairobi. I've taken time myself. I've traveled after elections to meet journalists on the ground. I've gone to Isiolo, I've gone to Lodwar, I've gone where? Up to yesterday, to meet journalists. Why didn't they give us results? And if you are looking at even, if you listen to the court, to the Supreme Court transmission, those things were never displayed. In some areas, returning officers were reading from TV. For that, so what were you? We have clips. Gadara have taken time because of that criticism. I've taken time to walk around to ask journalists to share with me some of the results, those who managed to be allowed in returning, to share those things. It's difficult. It's not easy, as we are saying in Nairobi, that they were just ignoring. In some areas where even returning officers were moving tallying centers, journalists could not trace them.
And some journalists actually were saying that results were being announced from Nairobi, meanwhile counting was still going on.
So those stories are there. No, those stories should not be submitted. Those stories should not be submitted to Gadara. Those stories are there. Because the journalists were not submitting the stories to Gadara. So to come to the Media Council, because I have taken time, because you have persistently portrayed that journalists had results which they refused to announce. They didn't have those things. And attend the 27th meeting, which I'm told you we are doing, and listen to some of these practical things that we are talking about, so that we are not discussing things that were not there. Even if they...
And Gadara, as a journalist, it looks like you hadn't done your homework in regards to collusion. Now that collusion that you're talking about...
I was going to that. And there's a trend analysis that we are doing, the media trend analysis. And if you start looking at it, you remember we had a discussion here about these things of petitions, where people just write a petition and says, Gadara is a thief, you take to anti-corruption. And people cover. And gradually we found that it's a way people were just maligning others. I mean, so we had a discussion about how should the media cover these allegations of petitions and blah, blah, you know, all the, because it turned out that a lot of people were using those things to fight other things that were not genuine collusion. If you look at most of those stories that we are talking about, if I'm talking about collusion and what, that is not a systematic collusion, it's individual journalist mistakes. Sometimes we are doing those things. You see most of our weekend stories, especially the print, you see a lot of those allegations, the claim, the impeccable sources things, too much. You'd see most of the stories about allegations come on Monday and Tuesday, where most of these individual journalists know most of the senior editors are not in. There's a loophole, especially on Sunday and Monday, where people leak in these stories. So it's not a sustained thing that media sat and said, we will be doing this, we will be doing this. There's no collusion. But it's individual mistakes where journalists are. And we have asked media houses, because the era of media gurus is back.
Yes.
Which individual media houses need to deal with.
And I think there needs to be a clear distinction between now the media owners and possibly journalists, because journalists are working in a certain environment, and sometimes you're working under...
I mean, come on, the media owners are part of the press. I mean, they own the press. And my thing is, and I said clearly, that the collusion, I think, that happens is happening at a higher level. I'll give you an example. When S.K. Macharia last year went to the Senate, one of the things that he said is that if he is prevented from reporting the results at the constituency level, he would be the first guy in court. It is 6 weeks later. Nobody has seen him there.
He doesn't have the
My point is this. All of this is happening, and there is a policy, or whether they've sat down with government and agreed.
Who's they? Please,
they being your media owners, and I think, to a large extent, your senior editors. And I think that there is a lot.
Those are very serious allegations.
There are serious allegations. There are serious allegations. But I think there is a pattern that we have seen from before the elections, through the elections till now.
Those are serious allegations, Gadara, and it's speculative.
These are not just isolated failures.
That's speculative, and that's your opinion.
Gadara, as a curator.
But this idea that all we have are isolated failures, here and there.
As the curator of the elephant, as the curator and a journalist, take time and investigate and give us those facts instead of us speculating here, and give us where those meetings happen, those policies where they are made, then we will. But if we remain just discussing speculative things, then we are not helping. We are doing the same fake news that we are accusing.
I don't think it's fake.
And I want us to move the conversation forward, because we have been in a certain mode between the 1st of September, when the presidential election was nullified, was null and void. And let me start with you, Julie. Do you think we've done a good job in letting the public know what exactly happened? What is it that the petition was about? What are we waiting for? Why are the elections on the 17th? There's just been so much happening, but there's also been a lot of propaganda and spin happening. Have we concentrated more on the spin or the facts?
I think the spin problem is a huge one, because every time you try and put out a fact, there are 10 other people who are trying to put out fake news. So you're constantly battling social media, Victor, even though you're saying that social media is not such a big threat. But especially in this age where there's an organized movement to create fake news almost every hour on the hour. So as you're trying to educate the people on what is actually happening, you're battling with this fake news. The second thing is, we've had so many analysts on TV, for example, like ourselves, discussing these issues and giving different sides of the story, interpreting the law in different ways. For example, the whole issue of what does it mean to nullify and void and invalidate an election? Does it mean you're doing a rerun or a runoff? Does it mean that election did not happen? Does it mean it was cancelled? Those kind of things have been, people have had various interpretations of that. So I think we're also dealing with the kind of a new, this has never happened before in Kenya where an election has been invalidated. So it's a new creature that people are trying to interpret. But I think as we have gone along and we have talked to all these experts and we've also tried to unpack the issue ourselves, we've kind of done a good job in trying to interpret what has actually happened and what will happen. Because people know that the Constitution says that when the election is invalidated, a new one must be held within 60 days. It doesn't have to happen on 17th October because we still have, I think, a month and a half after that before we get to the end of the 60 days. People understand that there are going to be 2 people who are going to take part in the election, although that has also been contested. Should they be 2 people or 8 people? So I think our problem as journalists in this particular situation is the fact that it's a new creature. Even the Supreme Court itself is trying to interpret the Constitution for this particular scenario. So we're almost playing catch-up in terms of we're growing together as everybody is learning at the same time. But in terms of putting that information out there, I definitely think we have been bombarded with information.
There's so much information coming in. Victor, we have so much information coming in. There's a lot of propaganda, but at the end of the day, and there's also the balance of selling, because, I mean, when there's one headline maybe that is very sensational and another one that is purely giving you facts and figures, the sensational one is likely to get more hits. That balance, how do we get that balance right?
One, thanks. Julie, what I meant on the social media is that social media is not necessarily competing, but it's an alternative, it has its space. So it's the business of journalists to ensure, and we have taught people about fake news, detecting of fake news and what. And you see, once journalists lose their work and start fighting the bloggers who are paid, we lose it. So us, we should concentrate on giving factual, detailed stories as we fight within the fake news and the confusion that is happening. But you see, as trained journalists, we can't fight that. Let's concentrate and give where our strength lies. So that, so that was just to clear that. But 2, my main concern actually with the presidential and the rest, I was a bit disappointed, not because of the coverage, but because why, for example, did we all of a sudden, when there was the Supreme Court, put our system court reporters on the back burner? And we obviously now sent our star reporters to the court. Why? I would have liked to see Paul Ogemba, for example. These are people who have reported courts. We have trained them, retrained them on reporting on petitions, on court reporting, but we never saw them. And these are people who have helped us in detailed analysis because they understand some of those court processes.
But don't you think the people who were sent did quite a good job? I think that the people, they caught up real quick with the happenings and the law.
They picked. I have no problem. They did the wonderful work. I mean, it was too much, obviously, and obviously it was, as people have said, political judicial processes that needed a mixture. But some of the confusions that we have been seeing would have been corrected if we had sent court reporters. I mean, they could have, because, I mean, I've seen a few things that largely, but the politics are taken over with the spin, with the gurus back in the newsroom. Obviously, the factual things, the court matter has obviously been overweight by the political, and like you mentioned, largely, while studies have shown that political stories don't sell, but there's still a feeling, especially from our advertising.
That do sell.
If I may, I'd like to bring a little rain to this sort of self-congratulatory parade and all this backslapping we are hearing. Oh, it's very nice. It's very nice.
Gadara, there's some things you have to admit. Just be honest.
There was a problem, and I don't think we should ignore it. First, I'll say the fact that you gave the space for people to discuss, which is very different from what happened in 2013, I think is great. It's fantastic.
At least I've had something positive.
Sadly, I think a lot of the content and what came across, and if we measure it by whether or not people understood, number one, what the case actually was about, or what was NASA actually presenting, what were they actually arguing. In my discussions with people, seems not too many are very clear about what the case is.
But that's not the blame for the media.
No, definitely. I think part of the job of the media is to explain.
Gadara, honestly,
Gadara, if you present the petition as it has been
talk or you don't.
taken to court, where is the room for misunderstanding?
Unless we are saying that the job of the media was to plant a camera at the Supreme Court and just let them
say,
say,
there was so much analysis.
You had analysts, you had all this. What was the point?
The point was to explain the issues.
So if people come out and they don't understand,
then whose fault is that?
Then
whose fault is that if you're explaining and people are not understanding?
You are not explaining it.
If you understood and I understood,
and here's why I think you're not explaining it. And this is, let me tell you why I think you're not explaining it. what happens in most of the forums that, and the panels that we've had is you will get a NASA guy, you'll get a Jubilee guy. Lots of it will degenerate into a shouting match between this guy and that guy. Not too much articulation of what the problem is or what the issue is. What you're looking for, and this is what our media has always done, is to report things from this political point of view, to privilege this fight between political groups. I think lots of the coverage tended to focus that way, and lots of the panels, you know, even yesterday I was watching it on AM Live. You know, you've got a panel of Miguna and Otiende Amolo, and on the other side you have Ishungwa and Kimani. And I'm asking, what do you think is going to happen there? You're going to have reasoned discourse?
No, that one I totally disagree, because we have had panels that are balanced. We have had panels that explain, and that was just one show. But let me pose you.
Not every panel that is that way, but the majority of them are that way. And I think if you measure your job by whether or not people understand
that's not the business of the media.
Oh, it's not to make people understand. Oh my goodness.
Gadara, I'll pose you. And even
I totally misunderstood what you guys have been trying to do.
No, Patrick. To be fair, I want to pick calls, but I'll even come back to you on, is it the big elephant? The panel that you had was one-sided, but anyway, we'll come back to that just now. Let me take a call from Victor in Nairobi. Good morning, Victor, and thank you for calling. Victor?
Hi, good morning.
Morning, Victor.
I'm watching the discussion.
Yes, go ahead.
And honestly, I would like to ask a question. My question is so simple. Who is controlling our media? Because recently, when after the elections, I saw KTN running a story about the situation of the country, and they were saying they were bringing all pictures from CBD. Matatus were running, people were just walking. And in real sense, there was no such a thing in town. There was no such a thing. So the question is, who is controlling our media?
All right.
Who is holding our media by the testicles?
Okay.
Who controls the media?
No. That's the truth.
Thank you, Victor. We have Brian from Kwale. Good morning, Brian. Thank you for calling. Brian from Kwale, go right ahead. Brian in Kwale, if you can hear us, your question or comment. And
good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Brian.
Go right ahead.
I'm calling from South Coast of Kenya.
Okay.
And I want to contribute to the debate.
Go right ahead.
I want to articulate, I don't say that Gadara is really articulate, he's speaking the right thing. Although you guys on the other side, you seem to be bashing Gadara as if he's not saying what's right. Gadara shows that there's a certain pattern by which the media has been reporting issues, pre-election, after election, and even right now. You seem to be reporting the right things, or you seem to be siding with one side, which is the government. So we hope that can change. The other thing is about the culture of media trying to report what sells instead of what's right. It's you who created that culture, and you need to painfully stop it by reporting facts, putting the right headlines, and slowly Kenyans will start listening to the right things and will start still buying your newspapers because you'll have to rerun and get the right culture. Point number 3, the way the media is like reporting the demonstrations by Jubilee is very different from the way they are reporting demonstrations from the opposition. Why does there seem to be some partisanism in that way you are covering the situation? All in all, what I would want to say as a Kenyan, the media has been insulting the intelligence of Kenyan people by reporting either with selective amnesia or selectively reporting some things and ignoring certain things which are very important. So can you stop? Because we watch you guys, we watch Kenyan media and we love Kenyan media, but it has to stop.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brian from Kwale. And I don't know if you want to react to that. Let me start with Victor Bwire. There is a question from Victor, your namesake, who's asking who controls Kenyan media, maybe alluding to what Gadara was saying earlier, that there seems to be a collusion.
Thank you, Mike. One, we moved away from the era of control long time ago. Nobody controls anybody. And whoever thinks media is controlled by anybody needs to update. We have a very liberal media in Kenya. And two, what people need to think, and this is a program we are running on media literacy to help people understand how media operates, that Kenya media is one, we have media in Kenya. We have no Kenya media. We have just media in Kenya. Two, these people are in fierce competition. So they can never be where they sit and say, this is how we'll approach news and how, I mean, there's never editor sit and say, this will be our headline tomorrow. This guy, everybody is in competition. So nobody controls Kenya media. Two, we have very experienced, trained journalists. I was telling somebody in one panel yesterday that even outside our own local media houses, if you go to Al Jazeera Kenya office, go to CNN Kenya office, BBC Kenyan office, is staffed by Kenyan journalists, very experienced, working. So people must understand that there's nothing wrong with Kenyan journalists.
Of course.
But they must understand the bigger media landscape in which journalists operate. Journalists only make 3–4% of what goes to media in this country, which people must understand the structure of our media operations. That would help them start understanding who owns media, who influences, what that must come out. So nobody controls Kenya media. It's just that, two, media is a creative art. It's not a social science with fixed formulas where people see it. So the art of headline writing, for example, nobody controls. It's creativity of that person who was on duty that day and the team. And they agree that this is the creativity we're having around. So we'll have sometimes things that people would think don't support. Because we must also give editors the latitude to do their work.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can't allow everybody in the streets to be determining which headline.
And I can see Gadara holding his head. I don't know if it's in disagreement. But before I come to Gadara, because I think I know what he wants to say, let me hear from Julie. Brian is saying that we are bashing Gadara. We seem to be bashing Gadara. However, Brian feels that Gadara may have a point.
Brian, first of all, Gadara is always bashing us, so he needs a taste of his own medicine. But I think what does control the Kenyan media, perhaps, is the bottom line. It's profit. It's not necessarily a person, a group of people, or a party. Because, like Bria says, the media houses are in business. But in the sense of collusion and patterns, there might have been a pattern. There might have been some fumbling in the coverage of the election before and after. But there's a lot of self-reflection happening right now in newsrooms where people are actually looking inward and because of all the bashing and trying to see where did we go wrong and how can we make this thing right. And of course, there are media gurus and there are people who are planted in newsrooms. There are a few bad apples here and there. But there's a complete distinction between journalists and media owners, which I think, Gadara, you must make. You cannot put them all into the same bucket and say that we are all colluding with some forces. Let me finish, yeah? So in terms of coverage of these elections going forward, I think we learned a very big lesson, especially when there was a backlash and people noticed those patterns that you're talking about. I will agree to them. I think now we're trying to get back on track. But to make a blanket assumption, not even allegation, that people there's a piper playing the tune and we're dancing.
All we're doing is dancing. Gadara, I'll ask you to hold that thought. I want us to take a break. Just hold that thought. Just hold that thought. It's now 5 minutes to 8. We want to release KTN home, and those of us on KTN News are continuing with this conversation in the news.